Ford GT90. Ford once decided to build a supercar to beat the absolute best in the world, which is a great idea on paper, except they only gave their engineering team 6 months and a shockingly small budget to actually make it happen. They took the chassis and suspension from a Jaguar XJ220 which Ford owned at the time, and then used electron beam welding to fuse sections of 2 modular V8 development blocks together. By slicing a couple of cylinders off each block, they created a custom 90-degree V12 and then added 4 turbochargers to make sure it was fast enough, which sounds incredible, but it immediately created a problem most car companies never have to think about. The engine generated so much heat that it was actively melting the rear body panels during testing. To stop the car from literally consuming itself, the engineers lined the engine bay with a commercially available flexible ceramic insulation blanket, a material that actually shared its chemical composition with aerospace heat shielding. Now, you would think a car this advanced would lead to a production hypercar, or at least inspire a generation of sports cars. But the business side of Ford decided the sharp, triangular, new-edge styling of the GT90 was actually perfect for mass-market economy cars. So instead of a Le Mans destroyer, the GT90's design DNA was sent straight to the commuter lot, showing up years later on the 4-cylinder Ford Ka, which means one of the most extreme mid-engine projects of the 90s ended up living its legacy through cheap, everyday hatchbacks, Mercedes-Benz C112. Back in 1991, Mercedes built what they called the C112, a car that was essentially a rolling laboratory meant to show off the future of automotive technology. It had a massive V12 engine and a manual gearbox, but the real party trick was an experimental suspension system called active body control. This system could instantly adjust to the road to keep the car flat in corners, a piece of tech that was years ahead of anything else on the market, and the public absolutely went crazy for it. Mercedes wasn't even planning to sell the car, but they reportedly had 700 people write firm deposit checks anyway, which is odd because at that point, instead of taking the free money and building the car, Mercedes executives just changed their minds. The early 90s global economic recession had just hit, the high-end supercar market was collapsing, and Mercedes was dealing with intense corporate austerity after massively overspending on the development of the new W140 S-Class. Suddenly, a low-volume hypercar felt like a massive liability, so they handed all the deposit checks back and canceled the program entirely, leaving that futuristic active suspension system on the shelf for another 8 years before it finally debuted on the production 1999 CL Class Coupe and 2000 S-Class sedan, Yamaha OX99-11. You probably know Yamaha for making motorcycles or pianos, but back in the early 90s, their engineers were busy building Formula One engines and decided those engines deserved a road car. The plan was to build a street car that felt as close to a racing machine as humanly possible. They built a carbon fiber tub and placed the passenger directly behind the driver in a single file, making the cabin look more like a fighter jet than a normal car. The engine was a detuned 3.5-liter version of their actual F1 V12, which spun all the way to an unbelievable 10,000 RPM. They planned to sell this highly complex machine for around $800,000, which sounded perfectly reasonable to the wealthy buyers of Japan's booming economic bubble. But then, the bubble burst and Japan's economy tanked. Suddenly, Yamaha was looking at a project that was running way over schedule, costing far too much money, so they quietly killed the project after building just 3 prototypes. Bentley Hunaudieres. In the late 90s, the Volkswagen Group went on an absolute buying spree, acquiring Bentley, Lamborghini, and Bugatti all at once. They had also just designed a massive, naturally aspirated 8.0-liter W16 engine, but they had a problem. They had no idea which of their newly acquired brands should get to use it. To figure it out, they took a Lamborghini Diablo chassis, stuffed the big W16 in the middle, painted the body British racing green, and slapped a Bentley badge on the nose to gauge public reaction. They showed it off, and while people liked it, management realized that a mid-engine hypercar didn't really fit Bentley's brand of heavy, comfortable luxury. Luckily, Volkswagen's design studio had actually been working on two parallel concepts for that exact mechanical package at the same time. Executives decided the alternative design, a sibling concept penned by designer Joseph Kabong, was the one that truly deserved the engine. That second car was given a Bugatti badge and eventually evolved into the Veyron. The Bentley badge proposal, meanwhile, was quietly pushed into storage and never spoken of again, essentially erased from the history of the hypercar program it helped launch. TVR Cerbera Speed 12. TVR is famous for making sports cars that are slightly terrifying to drive. In the late 90s, they built something so wild it scared the company's own owner. They wanted to build a car to go racing, so they created a monstrous 7.7-liter V12 by mating two custom straight six-cylinder heads to a bespoke steel block and crankshaft. During testing, the engine was so violent that it snapped the input shaft of a dynamometer rated for 1,000 horsepower. Engineers eventually had to calculate total output, estimating it somewhere well north of 800 horsepower, but then the racing regulations changed, making the car obsolete before it even hit the track. Rather than throw the project away, TVR decided to put license plates on it and sell it to the public as a road car. At that point, the project had a safety problem. Peter Wheeler, the company's boss and an experienced racing driver, decided to personally evaluate the road prototype on public streets. He returned to the factory the next morning and declared that selling it to the public would be completely irresponsible. They refunded every single customer deposit, leaving the Speed 12 as a rare example of a car company deciding their customers' survival was more important than making a profit. Audi Avus Quattro. At the 1991 Tokyo Motor Show, Audi turned up with a car that looked like unpainted spaceship made of hand-beaten aluminum. It was inspired by the classic Auto Union race cars of the 1930s, and the specification sheet claimed it was powered by a highly advanced W12 engine, which was fine, except for one small problem. Audi hadn't actually finished building the engine yet, so rather than delay the show, they carved a replica of the engine out of wood, painted it to look like metal, and put it under the glass engine cover. The trick worked incredibly well. Wealthy collectors were so frantic to buy the car that some reportedly made unofficial, desperate offers of up to $12 million right there on the show floor. Completely unaware they were bidding on a wooden dummy, Audi politely declined the offers, and it would take a full decade of engineering before a real, working version of that W12 engine finally made it into a production car, debuting in the Audi A8 sedan Cizeta Moroder V16T. This car is the direct result of a designer getting incredibly annoyed at a bunch of corporate executives. Marcello Gandini, the legendary designer who drew the Lamborghini Countach, had spent years designing a wild, wedge-shaped proposal for the upcoming Lamborghini Diablo. But then Chrysler bought Lamborghini, looked at Gandini's design, and decided it was way too aggressive, softening the lines for the production version. Gandini was furious. Instead of letting his original design go to waste, he took his drawings to a former Lamborghini engineer and a wealthy music producer. Together, they decided to build the car themselves. They kept Gandini's original, unfiltered design for the front of the car, but to make things even more ridiculous, they engineered a custom 6.0-liter 16-cylinder engine and mounted it transversely, sideways, in the middle of the chassis. Because that engine packaging was so incredibly wide, Gandini himself had to draw a massive new rear end just to make it fit. It was wider, wilder, and much louder than the car Chrysler ended up building. In a way, it remains a rolling piece of artistic spite, showing the world exactly what the front of the Lamborghini Diablo was supposed to look like before the suits got involved. Vector W8, in the late 80s, an American company decided they were going to beat the Italians by building a supercar using aerospace technology. The result was the Vector W8, a car that looked like a fighter jet, complete with digital cockpit screens and a promised top speed of over 240 miles per hour. While the marketing was incredible, the reality of owning one was a bit of a nightmare. Most car magazines of the era struggled to even keep the test cars running long enough to measure their performance, leading many to suspect the car was mostly vaporware. The most famous disaster happened when tennis star Andre Agassi decided he absolutely had to have one. Agassi demanded delivery of his car so he could show it off at a party, completely ignoring the company's warnings that it was still on unfinished prototype. Because the thermal heat shielding hadn't been fully installed yet, the exhaust system overheated during the drive and melted the carpeting in the rear trunk. Vector took the car back to finish building it properly, but Agassi, through a fit-tan, demanded a full refund instead. It stands as a perfect example of what happens when a small company spends all their energy looking futuristic, but forgets to make sure the car actually works before handing over the keys. Jaguar XJ220 concept. This car started as an unofficial project built after hours by a small group of Jaguar engineers who called themselves the Saturday Club. They built a concept car with scissor doors, a massive V12 engine, and a complex all-wheel drive system borrowed from race cars. It was so stunning that over 1,500 people immediately handed Jaguar deposit checks to buy one. But then, the business decisions started happening. By the time the actual production car was ready 4 years later, the heavy V12 was gone, replaced by a twin-turbo V6 from a rally car. The all-wheel drive system was scrapped for simple rear-wheel drive, and the scissor doors were replaced with normal ones. The buyers, who had put down massive deposits, were furious. The mechanical bait and switch was bad enough, but the early 90s economic recession had also just hit, and suddenly these wealthy buyers desperately wanted their money back. So they launched massive lawsuits against Jaguar to void the contracts. And the wildest part? When it actually went to English court, the judge ruled in Jaguar's favor. The irony is that the production car was still incredibly fast, briefly holding the record for the fastest production car in the world. But to the people who bought it, it always felt like a compromise compared to the prototype they actually fell in love with.